Hello, and welcome to another edition of Welcome to the Jungle. And Tim Daniel, we finally have something fun to talk about. This was a stressful game, even though it really doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of the Bengals season. But they didn't actually be the team that did what Ralph Wiggum just did in his pants this time
Yeah,
around.
yeah. What a fitting clip for the week of all. Did you watch any of the Simpsons broadcast?
So I had a very stressful situation myself as I had to get my son to basketball practice.
Mhm.
And we went out to dinner because it's my mom's birthday. We celebrated that a little early in the evening. I told her since she's 67 now, she could eat at 5 or 5:30 and prepare for retirement anyway. But then my son had his basketball practice and he loves the Bengals, so he wanted to wait and watch, the whole thing. And so I took him. But the funny thing was, I thought, well, maybe I'll watch the Bengals anyway. I'm sorry, son. You just gotta, come home and join when it's over. My wife, when we got home, ran upstairs and changed in pajamas. So I had to take him to his basketball. So I was a little behind. I did get to see on Twitter as I was scrolling when I got caught up, the scores and things like that. But I look forward to going back. The Simpsons things was kind of funny. I guess they were a little behind in the production of
Mhm.
it, but it was really neat to see. It literally was the exact same routes and
Yeah,
everything the same. It's just the Simpsons. I know they did it with Toy Story a couple years ago. Bengals win 27-20, Tim, and we'll dive into all of that and even some of the things post game as we go through this episode.
mostly probably that, right? Yeah.
So thank you for joining us here on the Riverfront, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. 27-20. You had a situation where it looked like the Bengals were bengling again, 20-20. They get all the way to midfield, but they have holding and penalties, and they get knocked back. Almost lost a fumble. And yet, when it came time to punt, I told my son, earlier in the game, Rico took a little too long. He had a nice booming punt, but he took a little too long handling the ball and getting it off on a play where they weren't coming. Well, this time, old friend Nick Vigil came, got the block, and in a matter of seconds, you went from "oh no, we're doomed" to literally having flashbacks of Thanksgiving 1993 when Leon Lett touched the ball in the snow in the old Dallas Stadium. I just can't believe it, Tim. That the guy, I feel bad for the Cowboy who touched it, but I don't feel bad enough because the Bengals get the ball back, and it was winning time. Joe to Jamar.
Yeah, I mean, just total Bengal way to lose a game not done by the Bengals was pretty fascinating. You mentioned it felt like it, right? It felt like it was going to be just we were going to come on here, we're going to be doom and gloom because they found a way again to throw the game away, and it looked like everything possible. I mean, they get lucky on the Yoshivas incompletion, so that I thought it was a fumble. I don't know how you felt necessarily, but I'm glad they didn't call it that way. And then you mentioned Burrow gets sacked because Cody Ford once again misses an assignment, and ball squirts out of the pile, and thankfully someone's there. I think it was Ted jumped on it,
Yeah.
and then yeah, of all people, Nick Vigil, who gets his hands on the punt, looks great on that play, and gets the ball right back. The Bengals get the ball right back, and like you said, Ja'Marr doing Ja'Marr things, and I was laughing because I was texting you because I went to bed after the game, so I didn't see any of the post game stuff. We're gonna
Mhm.
get to later. So I listened to the walkout today from the Growler with Paul and Jay before we went on the show, just kind of get their thoughts because I knew Paul was obviously on site for the game. And the thing that Paul said, and I was like, "Oh yeah, he's 100% right." Is it's the exact same thing they did in the New Orleans game a few years ago when they won against Andy Dalton, where Joe hits Jamar and he has that like little curl and kind of
Right.
gets
Same play, just opposite side of the field. It's the
yeah.
same play.
And so it's and then this kind of just comes to just this two and their chemistry because of all those years playing together in college and the league, just knowing. And there's that one picture. I don't know if you've seen it, not to kind of continue talking about this by any means, but it's the Bengals won a game for the first time in God knows how long. Um, when Joe lets go of the ball, Jamar's shoulders are still facing the end zone. He hasn't
Right.
even turned around yet.
No, it's that's the first touchdown, right?
Yeah,
And it's a little drag route kind of, and yeah, it's just amazing. And my
well,
grandfather
it's
was.
Ralph Wiggum that caught it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it
Yeah,
wasn't. It was Bart that threw it. My grandfather was here, my grandmother as well. We're sitting there watching with my son and I said, watch this replay because they hadn't even shown the replay yet, but I was like, oh my goodness. I said, watch this replay. He's not even turned around yet when the ball leaves his hand. And it's just, you're right. It's a timing. You could have that if you work enough. I know Peyton Manning. I remember Chad Johnson and Carson Palmer when they were young in their career. They went to Indianapolis. Bengals played at 1 p.m. on Sunday. Colts played Monday night. They went and watched. I mean, they said they were watching the walkthrough and the warm-ups more than they cared to watch the game. I don't even remember if maybe there's some story that they didn't even stay for the game. But they went up there and they watched Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison in warm-ups. And it's stuff you can get down if you work hard enough and you put in the time. But this time has been put in well earlier than when Ja'Marr was drafted. Let's go to the stats a little bit because I put out a tweet this morning. It doesn't – I know people outside of Cincinnati or outside of our fanhood will roll their eyes at us, especially here in Columbus. I get the Browns and the Steelers fans, and they could care less that the Bengals are good. But if you watched that game last night in front of a huge audience, because the Cowboys, let's face it, bring in a huge audience no matter how bad they are, you're seeing what we've seen. And Troy Aikman, I mean, when's the last time we had somebody gush over one of our favorite players as much as Troy Aikman did? Maybe some people over Joey Votto over time, but Troy Aikman loved Joe Burrow even going into the game and then what he was seeing during the game. Burrow, 33 of 44, 369 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did throw the one interception where, as Paul Daner said in the walkout, that he was probably just latched on a little too long that time. A rating of 112.8. Chase Brown, 14 carries, 58 yards. You got to be above that 4 yards per carry. He's at 4.1. That's rushing. Ja'Marr even had the one rush for 14 yards, and I thought back to 2021 and 22 when they could never get any positive yardage, no matter how they tried. It goes to show, I think, even though he was already so strong in the lower body, Ja'Marr's continued to work on his strength, and obviously his speed is there as well. But here's the big one. Ja'Marr Chase, 14 catches, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns, a long of 40 yards. Just amazing. Chase Brown added in 6 catches and proving why in this offense he's more ideal than Joe Mixon is as a running back.
Yes.
And we're seeing it week to week just grow. It's growing more and more.
Awesome.
And then Yossi Voss did have 4 catches, Gesicki 3, T had 2 catches. So just an amazing night offensively. Look, Tim, you're going against Cooper Rush.
Yeah.
So
sure.
Even when they did have to punt there, the only lack of faith I had was the fact that they have such a good field goal kicker, the Cowboys do. So I was like, oh, he only needs to get really past midfield and he'll be fine. He'll take that kick. But my faith that Cooper Rush would not be able to do it, especially like when they got the ball back, I think didn't Ja'Marr score with about a minute left?
Minute one. Yeah, minute one.
Yeah, so against Dak Prescott or almost any other NFL quarterback, you'd think, ooh, that's too much time. But they needed a touchdown. They needed a touchdown to tie. And I didn't think Cooper Rush was going to do that. So obviously,
not to mention he hit CeeDee Lamb for about 15 yards the first play of the drive. You're like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. And,
but they're still keeping him in front. And
yeah,
that's the whole thing there, especially when they need a touchdown. Now, hey, I may have to explain myself a little bit here. My social media app of choice for sports information is still Twitter. I don't apologize for it, but I understand some folks don't want to be on there. I get it. But I wanted to do just a search because it's such a big deal, and it's the game itself, and it's also, as you intimated, the post game. I did a search for Joe Burrow. Here's the top tweets that came up. All right, and we can just go down through some of these. All right, the NFL tweeted a little while ago Joe Burrow's stats and what rank Joe and Ja'Marr both. 3,706 passing yards, first in the NFL. 33 passing touchdowns, first in the NFL. 285.1 yards per game, first in the NFL. Ja'Marr Chase, 1,319 receiving yards, and they're all first. I don't need to keep repeating that. 15 receiving TDs, 93 catches already. Just amazing. That's an NFL tweet. Of course, you get the video of the Simpsons donuts. Did you go to bed before that happened?
I did, but I saw it this morning. Yeah.
Ja'Marr just crushed Burrow's face with the donut, and then Joe got him back. And then Annie Agar, you know her. She does all the as if she's a different person. Remember? Okay, so let's get to this: the face mask issue.
There's like 5 things I want to point out through this, by the way, that we haven't gotten to yet. So please
even if I'm not whining that he's a superstar and you need to protect him, because he is, and they do.
Mm-hmm.
There's no quarterback in the NFL that would get his face mask ripped like he has in 2 of these games, the Baltimore game and this game. There's no quarterback in the NFL that doesn't get these calls. It's happened in other cases, I understand, but there's got to be some way. Zach Taylor saw it from the sideline.
Yeah.
You can't tell me one of 2 or 3 referees or officials didn't see it or couldn't see it, or they just aren't looking apparently. And, as quickly as they ruled Chase Brown's touchdown was indeed a touchdown because he never stepped out of bounds without going to the screen and the surface tab and all that, without doing any of that, without sending it upstairs like they do in college, it was voiced down to an earpiece saying, yep, that's a touchdown. As quickly as that can happen, you can tell someone if there's a personal foul face mask on a franchise quarterback. And so Annie Agar, her tweet was accompanied, and I wanted to figure out how to do this, but with that, that's supposed to be Joe's face after that face mask. It was, and it caused it caused his knee situation where he ended up putting a sleeve on for the final drive, and it was all because he got jarred back so much by that face mask grab that it tweaked his knee as well. So go ahead, talk about that a little bit and what he's gone through.
So there's that, obviously, the face mask, which is unbelievable, and just the fact that Jake kind of talked about today on the episode we've referenced a couple times already now, that's something the NFL needs to fix. Not in the sense that you don't have to make it a challenge or thing, but just something that's quick, like, hey, you missed that, add 15 yards to it. I agree with that. I completely agree with that. And then there's not only that, there's Micah Parsons.
Yep, that was the next one. Yep.
Yeah, gets that like helmet to helmet hit on Joe. And I thought Amarius Mims did as good as you possibly can guarding Micah Parsons.
Well, he had 0 tackles.
Right, but he was still the game plan.
Holdings. He obviously flushed Joe out more than once. Even Aikman, I think, was the one that said that on that play where there was a late hit, like he said they'd already had the flag on the ground, and then he threw the ball, and it's literally like 1001, 1002 at least. Yeah. And Parsons hits Joe, and it's almost as if because Joe is tough and didn't go down, that's why the guy didn't throw the flag, or he would have had to throw his hat or whatever because he'd already thrown his flag. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And once again, where is the offensive line?
That's what James Rapine tweeted from Sports Illustrated. His teammates can't let it continue.
Yeah, Max Crosby had that one in the Raiders game that was just horrible. And then this one. So that's really irritating. And
Joe chalks it up to it's football. We talked about this week. Joe is almost a danger to himself in that way because he almost looks at it like that's part of the game. And maybe it was, especially like when his dad played and things like that. And the football Joe was brought up to respect and things like that. But hey, man, this is a franchise quarterback. This is literally and in a year where we don't think the Bengals are going to go to the playoffs, it's like only a 3% chance right now that they could make the playoffs. In a year like that, this is all we have. Don't take a cheap shot on the quarterback when the play's already done.
Right. I completely agree. So I just want to make sure I got those 2 in there. And then I wanted to make sure you mentioned earlier the Cooper Rush thing, and like I get his Cooper Rush. And I know we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the defense. I thought the defense, say what you will about who's back there. Last I checked, that guy has an NFL patch on his jersey. So you kind of can only deal with who's out there on the field. I thought the defense was much better today. I mean, much better Monday night than they had been. And I get what people are going to say to that for sure. But CeeDee Lamb was good. He wasn't good in the second half because I thought the Bengals did a good job taking him out of the game. But I mean, that touchdown he had was a nice touchdown the first half. But what I'm getting at here is we have picked apart this defense and criticized them nonstop, as we should with what we're supposed to do. we have to give credit when they do something right. And I thought that Geno Stone interception in the first quarter, that was huge because the Cowboys are driving and they're in the red zone and he gets to pick. And I know nothing comes out of it. I still think that there's a lot of tackling issues, and we know Trey Hendrickson is the thing that makes the defense get going. But I thought Jermaine Pratt did pretty good in run defense in that game. He had quite a few big plays where he had like either short yard gains or tackles for loss that really helped out.
The one time when they hit Lamb right at the line of scrimmage and it looked like he had it teed up and he just let him go, I was beside myself because last week Jermaine's the one that said there weren't any missed tackles.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like,
of all people.
Can we watch this replay again? Absolutely.
Yeah. So just want to make sure I threw that in there real quick. And Cade York, short notice, gets signed. Pretty good.
Girlfriend's a cheerleader for the Cowboys. When I heard that, like on Sunday or Monday, I was like, "Oh, of course she is." Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's just these kind of stories seem to drop into the laps of NFL executives, like TV executives, and it's like, "Oh, we're going to highlight that." All right, to continue, kind of my theme here. Ben Baby from ESPN tweeted, and this is one of the big things. If the game itself wasn't exciting enough or something we can talk about for a while, Ben Baby's tweet, which every guy down there, every reporter down there had. So I'm not saying this is an exclusive, but he said a bombshell from quarterback Joe Burrow. He said he feels confident the Bengals will be able to keep wide receiver Tee Higgins after this season. Said that's an ongoing conversation, both guys. I'd like to say I share Joe's confidence, although he knows more than I do about it, and he's more on the inside than I am about it. So it really doesn't seem that possible. And then you get the people that break down, even as much as Joe's cap hit jumps, even if they don't rework his deal, it's still not prohibitive when it's compared to some of these other quarterbacks' contracts on a cap hit basis in the next 3 to 5 years. So I don't know. Certainly we would like to have all three guys together as long as possible. But then you've got to go ahead and follow through and somehow fix the other problems as well.
Yeah, and so I was really excited. So, like I said, you texted me and said Joe's comments after the game, and I said I didn't see him. What did he say? And then that's when you kind of filled me in. So I went and listened to the Growler to kind of get caught up. And here's what I'll say about why I kind of appreciate Joe saying this, in the sense of like, if Zach Taylor says this, it's okay, whatever. If Mike Brown says this, it's okay, whatever. If Katie Blackburn says this or Duke Tobin, you go, sure, whatever, that sounds nice. But Joe Burrow said it. Mm-hmm. And Joe Burrow is the franchise, like you said. So I think if Joe Burrow's the one that says, hey, like I have confidence we can get this done. And then Tee Higgins comes out and says, bleep. If Joe says it, then it must be true. And then Ja'Marr says, yeah, it's definitely possible. That means that this is some LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh thing going on right now with these conversations of how can we make this work. And it's a little different in football, obviously, than basketball. I totally understand that. But I genuinely believe that this is definitely a possibility because Joe said it. Like I said, anyone else says it, I don't believe it. I say, okay, sure. But Joe says it, I believe it.
I tend to agree with what you're saying. If you look back to, and maybe they just know there's nothing they can say, or not, they weren't ever going to say anything maybe, but if you think about Ja'Marr and T and their lack of comments, and certainly they've probably been instructed not to bash the organization and not to do this, not to do that. And sure, I was frustrated with Ja'Marr this year for kind of holding in throughout training camp when a lot of those deals that aren't quarterback related, even across the league, don't get done that early. And so when Adam Schefter continues to rail on these things, I can't help but roll my eyes because it's just, and even last night I tuned in right before I took my son to basketball, and it's the same thing all over again. Well, they're not going to take any discounts. And like, you don't have to. The salary cap is very high.
Yeah.
And if the Bengals choose to build this way, then they can build this way. Now, again, Mo Egger has a tweet. I don't share Joe Burrow's confidence that the Bengals will get a deal done with Tee Higgins because they've had 2 years to get a deal done with Tee Higgins, and they haven't. They've also managed to not get Ja'Marr Chase signed, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. The idea is also there's other positions that need addressed, and we could have this trio and love it and be excited about it, but it's not going to be the Miami Heat because even though the
There's
Miami
no
Heat,
Ray Allens. There's no Joel
right,
Anthony's. There's no.
but even like the Heat or the Cavs when LeBron came back there, you could argue, oh man, players 5 through 8 aren't good enough because they had to give all that money to the first 3. But it didn't matter because you're only playing 5 guys at a time, and the first
Right.
3 were so good at their primes. So
I'd make the argument J.R. Smith was pretty good for that team, but I digress.
I understand. But again, I remember, guys on that first Heat team just
Oh my God, it was hilarious.
you wouldn't be playing anywhere else in the NBA right now except for the fact that these 3 guys make 80% of what they're paying, the team. So you can't do it and expect to win, although you could do it and hope or trust that the scouting staff and everyone involved can get these guys ready to play. Or unfortunately for Lou Anarumo, perhaps you have faith that the next guy you hire will be able to develop these defensive players better and get them ready to go too.
Yeah, and I think that, obviously I understand that part of it. And maybe just selfishly, I just want to see these 3 be together.
Sure.
Because they're a lot of fun and they're basically a Madden team, those 3. Just like throw it up there and one of them's gonna come down with it. But I also kind of feel like with this team that they do kind of have to figure out the other options for sure. And you're absolutely right there. I mean, you look at this is a terrible defense. And it'd be one thing if the draft picks didn't hit. But a lot of the free agents haven't either.
Yeah.
So Sheldon Rankins, who's played 2 games, maybe 3.
He and Geno Stone are the biggest waste of money this team has spent.
Nick Scott last year, he was
Mhm.
frustrating. Yeah, man, it's a lot of those dudes. And
and it's the difference between Trey Hendrickson, Von Bell, Cheeto Wuzier, and DJ Reader.
yeah,
That wave obviously
he was
worked.
the guy they signed from the Vikings that got hurt. He was supposed to be pretty good.
Yeah, it was the corner. I'm blanking on his name as well, but exactly.
Back to the Vikings. Yeah,
That was the one that didn't work out of like 5.
right.
If you can do that, then okay. If some of these would have worked the last 2 years,
Yeah,
this would be a totally different scenario, but it's just not. Peyton Manning during the Manning cast, Joe Burrow is playing at an MVP level. His defense is going to prevent him from getting that award. Probably true. Although
but
sometimes,
should it?
well, no, because as I think it was Chris Garber tweeted last night that if Joe and Jamar weren't on this team, it'd be every bit as bad as the '90s Bengals teams.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about David Klingler and Darnay Scott, who I guess
Yeah,
Darnay
Tee
Scott was.
Higgins would be Darnay Scott or
Yeah.
Carl Pickens in that scenario. And let's look at our venerable leader Chad Dotson's tweet. And this was actually during the first half when things weren't going quite as well.
Mhm.
He said, I have this recurring nightmare that the Bengals will waste Joe Burrow's career like the Reds wasted Joey Votto's career by refusing to put a complete team around him. Now, the comp isn't quite there because Joe's already won playoff games and moved in advance. Games equals series in baseball.
Mhm.
They've advanced twice, very, very significantly through the playoffs, but now certainly it's harder
5
and
playoff
harder
wins, yeah.
if these moves aren't made. So I guess as we have been reveling in the greatness of winning a game, having fun, enjoying this team, and really enjoying Joe and Ja'Marr all season, I guess I'd ask you, what are your thoughts now? Certainly, again, 3% chance of making the playoffs. So what are your thoughts now, and what are you looking for the rest of the season?
Well, first, I'm looking to beat the Titans.
Yeah.
That's step one, obviously. It's a place that Joe's had a lot of success. It's a place where last year they played horrible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, they find a way to win that game against a team they were far better than they lost to by 3 touchdowns. The Bengals are probably in the playoffs. So I think that that's a game that's going to be in the back of Joe's head too, because he knows where he hasn't played well and who he hasn't played well against, because that's who Joe is. So I suspect they'll go out there and I think they'll take care of business. Obviously, the Brian Callahan thing is going to stand up. This is Tyler Boyd's game against the Bengals, his first time. There's going to be those storylines. So I suspect they'll win that game. I don't see them winning out, and that's what's going to take, and then some for them to get in the playoffs, like you said, with that 3% chance.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can just be somewhere where you feel good going into 25. You feel good about, you're always going to feel good when you have Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase, obviously. Anything's possible when those two are on the field. I think that's been the thing that's been so frustrating about this season is you have those guys, you should win more games. But for the rest of the year here, I'm just all about just kind of keeping your franchise guys healthy.
Yes.
Figuring out who you can count on for the long run. I think Amarius Mims has shown that he's a guy you can rely on to get better. What we've seen so far. And, the DJ Turners before he got hurt, I thought was really good this year in stretches. So this is just for me, who are part of the core when they try to get better for the future. And I think that's all I really care about the rest of the year. If
I go back to pre-injury in Burrow's rookie year, the thing that stuck out to me after so many years of, post 2015 Marvin and the first year of Zach, it was enjoyable and exciting to watch the Bengals play in 2020, even though they weren't winning.
Right.
Because Joe Burrow was there and he always gave you a chance and he always gave you something to be excited about.
Yeah.
And so you're right. Keeping them all upright is the big thing. But knowing we have a watchable, product on the field as fans of a team, we wanted more this year. Certainly, I'm not saying we should be, well, okay, we didn't go to the Super Bowl like we wanted to, or even make the playoffs likely. At the same token, it could be, the 2001 Bengals or the 2000 Bengals that, the only thing we had was Corey Dillon and that was it. And
new stadium, here's Corey Dillon.
A few times that was fun, but beyond that, I was joking. I was at that game between the Bengals and the Browns the week after Dillon set the rushing record, and what was it, Scott Mitchell against Spurgeon win or something like that. So I'm excited to watch the team every week, and it's going to be enjoyable. And hopefully, last night's game, certainly from a national perspective, I think a lot of people woke up. One other thing I don't think I mentioned before we let everybody go, Jay Morrison had to tweet that it was the second primetime win on the road this year, I think. They've never done that in their history.
Oh, yeah.
So in a season that's been as abysmal as possible, as far as if you look at expectations versus results, they've done something they've never done in their whole history. So it's just like, just roll your eyes and just can't understand it, And I guess we just have to go with the flow as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is difficult that they're losing the games they're losing, but you do still have 9-1 and 5, and they're pretty darn fun to watch.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm so excited to watch them play for years to come. I'm very confident that Ja'Marr will be re-signed. I'm not as confident about T, but Joe is. So we'll trust in Joe, and we'll see how it goes.
Makes Hard Knocks very watchable this week, doesn't it?
I guess so. I've got to watch the first one.
I do too. Yeah.
I was actually pretty down about the whole thing. Like, oh man, this was supposed to be like a coronation, and now it's we're talking about Batmobiles. But but anyway, it'll be enjoyable nonetheless. So hey, Tim, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're very busy. I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. Part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. If you watch us on YouTube, hit like and subscribe, and also, same as Apple Podcasts, we could use a boost in the numbers, so to speak, and keep this show going. All right, Tim, thanks a lot.
Hooday.